The law and order thing, which the National Party has picked as a vote winner in the run-up to the general election. But there is no doubt, and certainly from the feedback and the stories we hear on this program, on the platform, and what I hear anecdotally and I see, as I did this morning, the throwing of excrement by a street person in the street managed street Wellington. Law and order and what to do about criminality is a big issue in New Zealand right now. So the National Party say, what do? We have stronger policies, which means longer. Stronger actually means longer sentences. We remove from judges certain discretions they have to discount sentences for convicted criminals. And we lock more people up, which will be the inevitable result of that. But I do have a question. Does that work? Does that stop people committing crimes? Does it put the fear of God into your average crim or not? Well, who do we ask about that? Well, you can't trust criminals, so you can't ask them, can you? So I thought someone who deals with them, someone who defends them, someone who makes his living, actually, off people committing crime, and I mean that not in a disrespectful or a negative way. So we are talking now to, I hope I get this right, I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong, criminal barrister Michael Bott. Michael, welcome to the platform. Nice to have you with us.
Oh, g'day, Sean. Perhaps I should say I make my living defending people accused of committing crimes.
Very good technicality. I knew you'd pick me up on something. What proportion of them end up having committed crimes, Michael?
I would say that approximately half the people I represent are either discharged without conviction, acquitted, or else the charge is amended in some way.
I know how that is from quite recent experience. Okay. Okay. But there are people who commit crimes, and often, how many of your clients, Michael, face, whether they're convicted or not, repeatedly face criminal charges? So like career criminals or in that milieu?
Right. Now, that's a very good question. You see, prison in and of itself doesn't work. So a number of people, when they go to prison, they might go as what we call a clean skin for the first time. They might be young, Māori or Pākehā, but if they're Māori, they get taken away from their community. They go into prison, say, at 17 or 18, as used to be the case, and they're on their own. They have to survive. And unfortunately,
same as a Pākehā in prison would be on his own.
That's right. And a number of Pākehā are also on their own like that. And
well, everyone. It doesn't matter the colour of your skin, Michael. You go to prison, you're on your own.
Exactly. Yeah. But the point is, we do bang up a disproportionate number of Māori and Pacifica. Māori are around, I think, 15% of the general population, and they're around 45%.
Yeah, but Michael, is that because they get caught more doing crimes or get accused of crimes?
This is where we say, simple solutions don't work for complex problems. What I'm trying to say and get across here is that when you go to prison like this, you have to, in a sense, you're actually automatically recruited, or the pressure is to be recruited into a gang. Unfortunately, our prisons are taxpayer-funded gang recruitment machines, and gangs often expand and blow out because young men are corralled into prison, isolated from their families, and they move into the gangs. This is the trouble. Prison just doesn't work like this, and people think it does. Reminds me of my father in the old days when he told me when we had an excited dog, cut its nuts off, it'll calm it down. It doesn't work. Let's look at the evidence and see what does work. But prison and long sentences just make damaged people...
For normal people, though, Michael, the threat of losing their liberty and being sent to prison is a disincentive to break the law, is an incentive not to break the law, to be lawful.
That's correct, but for people who are damaged, once you've gone past...
Are they damaged or are they just criminals, Michael?
No, they're usually damaged. If you look at the rates...
In what way?
Well, there's traumatic brain injuries. A number of inmates have got traumatic brain injuries, about 85%. There's addiction issues, there's poverty issues, these sorts of things. It's a multifaceted problem. And just to focus on banging them up might be red meat for the electorate, But the research for over 50 years shows that it doesn't work. If it worked, I'd be all for it. I'd be 100% behind it as a way to stop offending, but it doesn't. All it does is it makes damaged people worse, and it drives up rates of offending. Of course, we should have prisons for the most dangerous of people. I agree with that. We need that. But, when you're at school, when you're about my age, Sean, when the kid was, kids were scared of the cane. But once they got cane, it was nothing. You lying bugger.
I wasn't scared of the cane, and I got it a few times.
Well, that's right. Precisely. Once you cane, you've passed that threshold, you go on. And this is the trouble with prisons. You and I would be frightened of going to prison. We don't want to do that. But the fact is, people, once they've gone over that threshold, and for some of them, it's like a badge of honour. It's like going to university or a finishing school. And it really breaks my heart to see generational conviction patterns for people going into prison. It just fails. This is why Bill English, back I think in the last national government, described prisons as a moral and fiscal failure. It costs us $150,000 a year to keep an inmate in prison in a failed gang recruiting, taxpayer-funded recruiting.
Well, it doesn't actually. You could play around with those figures. There's marginal costs and cost increases.
You can, but it's angels on the head of the pin. But there are around 8,376 inmates currently in prison, or 170 New Zealanders per 100,000 per head of population. The OECD average is only 140.
Yeah, but the OECD isn't New Zealand. And look, I think New Zealanders in general, Michael, like having people who threaten them and their property locked up.
New Zealanders, if we had a proper debate with evidence, looking at the actual evidence, would suddenly realise that what we're advocating doesn't work. How would you like it if your $150,000 per inmate, or whatever it is, the millions and millions and millions we spend every year funneling into prisons doesn't work, and in fact makes damaged people even worse?
I don't care if they're damaged or not. I just want them to stop nicking myself and throwing excrement at people in the street.
Well, look. Hard cases make bad law, and extreme examples like that don't prove your case. Look at the evidence, take the rhetoric out of it and the redneck banter out of it, and look at the
hang on, Mike. No, Michael, hang on. What are you doing saying that people who want to be safe in a civilised society are rednecked? How simplistic is that rhetoric?
But people take the extreme examples and use those to make a case as a general rule. That doesn't work. Look at the evidence. Look at the rates of recidivism. Why did Bill English, hardly a supporter for Liberals, etc., call it a moral and fiscal failure?
Okay. Well, let's look at a less extreme example that's in the media today.
And by the way, shouting doesn't add to...
Okay, and we were both guilty of that, so let's dial it back, Michael. So, Michael, a story in the Herald this morning, and they get it wrong. They call him a robber. He wasn't. He was a thief at a motorcycle parts shop in Christchurch. Takes some stuff and just walks out. Gets chased. And apparently, as he's being chased, he's off. The cops come. I'll be going back to prison, so we can presume he had form. And I don't know how the guy was damaged. They catch the guy, or another guy catches him. They ring the police, and the police say, well, let him go. Do you not realise how that might get the people you call the rednecks rather upset?
Well, I don't know the story itself, but assuming that's true, of course you'd be upset. Who wouldn't be? On the other hand, we have a police force that is under-resourced, and I understand that. But that's a separate issue. What we're looking at, you could an extreme example there, but we're looking at prisons trying to...
No, I actually think that's an everyday example, Michael. And I think the reality for many New Zealanders is that watching people, and I've had staff members who've been in places where people have come and helped themselves and walked out with impunity.
I agree with that, but we've now morphed from the prison population to prisons work.
Yeah.
So an example of a robbery or a theft, shoplifting,
okay. But we are. This is all wrapped up in a feeling about law and order and lawlessness in our society, isn't it?
Well, that's correct, but the trouble is getting tough on crime like that. For example, the broken windows policy in New York in the 1970s didn't work. And so getting tough on crime without looking at the causes of crime and having a larger intelligent debate where there is a consensus across the parties as to what actually works, as opposed to drumbeating every election cycle to try and get people excited about an issue, offering simple solutions when we know they don't work, is not the way to solve the problem. It might get you votes in the short term, but long term it's going to cost you
Well,
millions.
it might make New Zealanders feel safer too, Michael, in the short term, which isn't a bad thing.
But you're buying into a lie that doesn't work. You want the truth, and you want to have an evidence-based...
What will work then? Give us a solution.
There is no simple solution. It's multifaceted. You've got systemic poverty. You've got an you've got an underrepresentation.
Oh, come on! When was the last time someone starved to death in New Zealand, Michael? We haven't got systemic poverty. We've got wealth and inequality, which creates resentment.
Yeah, but if you go to areas where you've got people worrying about do they pay the doctor's bill or do they get their
That's called anxiety, not poverty.
No, it's not. On the UN measures, it's called poverty.
God.
Go and look at the measures, and it's okay for you to condemn like that, but look at the evidence. And my point is, if we look at the evidence, if we look at the systemic pattern shown by tough on crime approaches in the past, like broken windows policy in New York, it doesn't work. Of course, it drives up conviction rates, it drives up the rate of imprisonment, but it doesn't make you safer in the long term.
Someone has texted and says broken windows did work. New York went from being a crime-ridden hellhole to incredibly safe.
Well, it's rubbish. You can just talk about that, but it doesn't work. And the same thing here. You could have, for example, in the United States, you could have, for example, figures about draconian punishments for all sorts of crimes. And you've got people going into prison on a 3 strikes regime, for example, and you have disproportionality, and it doesn't stop defending because these people are driven by desperate measures, they have limited social skills, and they commit crimes. You've got to have a more intelligent, evidence-based justice system. And it includes social policy, it includes law and order, it includes the prison system, but there has to be a better, more rational approach. Why is it, for example, that in some countries in Europe they have a different approach, they have a lower rate of crime, people are safer, whereas over here, following this macho lurch to madness, following an American trial...
A what? Sorry, macho lurch to madness.
A macho lurch to madness, yeah. You have this almost completely different approach, where you have this in the past punitive driven justice system in terms of punishments that doesn't work. Whereas in some parts of America and some parts of Europe, like the Netherlands, for example, or Norway and Sweden, it's completely different. And if we had a rational system where we looked at evidence, looked at the causes, and took the passion and the simple...
The cause of crime is criminals, Michael.
What drives those people to commit crimes?
That they're criminals and they haven't been taught better.
Well, that's just nonsense, Sean. You know that.
Well, why would they do it if they'd been taught not to do it? They might not do it.
Well, if people weren't beaten as children, they weren't brain damaged, there weren't drugs and systemic drug
so
use.
So if you get beaten with the belt or you've got a little bit of brain damage, you've got every right to be a criminal. That explains it all.
Not every right. No, but it increases your tendencies to commit those things. You've got different responsivity barriers in your brain. These are things that are long-term, and we need to fix them. It's not right. It's not appropriate. And as I say again, if prisons actually worked, I would be 100% behind them as a solution, but they're not.
Okay. Well, they do make me feel safer, I've got to say. And I think a lot of New Zealanders. But look, it is a debate that probably needs to be more nuanced and more engaged than it is at the moment. And I thank you for entering it. And I hate to say it, and you knew this, but judging by the text I'm getting, a lot of the people who listen to the platform disagree strongly with you. But we should all be challenged in our preconceptions, and we should have a debate.
Ask him how he's going to pay for it.
Yeah, well, I guess through tax dollars. We've got... Don't forget, Michael. Michael, I would point out this out in that regard. Do you know what the planned budget for social welfare in this country is? Well, it's limitless. Social welfare, Kāinga is given no budget for how much it's allowed to hand out in benefits, right? So why shouldn't justice be the same?
I tell you this. If you want a return on investment for the Department of Corrections, there's no gain. You're increasing reoffending, you're pulling more and more money into a funnel. If you're wanting results like you ran an airline, if that was Air New Zealand, it would be stuffed.
Yeah. All right, Michael. Look, I think you've joined the debate, and boy, you've sparked some reaction. And I thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Well, thank you, Sean. You're most amusing. Go well. Take care, mate.
All right, mate. Take it easy. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
That is Michael Bott, barrister. Well, there's a different view. There is a different view. What do you think of that different view?